And so after breaching the pass at Thermopylae on our map located here, the Persian juggernaut can continue its advance southward through Boeotia, the region of Greece here known as Boeotia, and into the Attic Peninsula, where they can are within striking distance of the city of Athens itself. And nominally, this was the reason why Xerxes invaded Greece. He wanted to burn this particular city to the ground. Now, the Greeks themselves are thrown into a sense of panic, even though Leonidas and his force at Thermopylae had bought the Greeks about a week's worth of time. There was still a big debate as to what to do should the Persians breach the pass at Thermopylae. And most of the Greeks, the Hellenic League, and certainly members of the original Spartan alliance, that those city-states that were based in the Peloponnese here, they wanted to basically wall off the Isthmus of Corinth here and just defend their home turf of the Peloponnese. There was a bit of wishful thinking that perhaps if the Persians got to Attica, burned Athens to the ground, they would just simply head on back home. Mission accomplished. The Athenians are punished, and they wouldn't continue their advance across the Isthmus of Corinth and into the Peloponnese itself, particularly if there was a set of fortifications here, a big wall with a lot more Spartans to defend it than the Persians had tangled with at Thermopylae. So there is confusion and panic on the side of the Greeks. They did not think that the Persians would be able to force the pass at Thermopylae as quickly as they did. So the Athenians themselves are going to really feel the pinch here, and I want to shift focus a little bit to what was going on at at the Battle of Thermopylae. I want to take a look at the engagements at sea that took place, because if you remember from the last lecture on the Battle of Thermopylae itself, I mentioned the fact that while the pass itself would be held by the 300 Spartans and several thousand other Greeks, the Athenians, who had invested all of their military potential into building a navy. Remember, under the guidance of the statesman Themistocles, the Athenians had invested money that they had or silver, I should say, that they had mined from the state mines at Laurium. Themistocles convinces the assembly to basically build at least 100 triremes, and again, some of the sources say as many as 200 triremes. Now, when the Persians do enter Greece, and the Spartans and the other several thousand Greeks are defending the pass at Thermopylae, well, the Athenians don't send hoplites to Thermopylae. They've got everybody invested in the fleet. And the Athenian fleet, as well as contingents from other Greek naval poleis, they head up to secure the flank, the ocean flank, or the sea flank, I should say, of the Spartans who are holding the pass at Thermopylae, because the fear was that the Persian fleet could somehow land somewhere along the coast here and maybe take the Spartan position from the rear. Ultimately, as happened, although that it happened because of treachery, and the Greeks were doing all that they could to guard against that, a seaward flanking movement. And there are a couple of naval engagements that are fought, and the Athenians gain a sense of confidence in their ability to defeat, or certainly to stalemate Persian naval assets. And there is also a fortuitous event in which Xerxes has decided to divide his navy in the hope of sailing down the coast of this island here, Euboea, and coming around and basically getting the Greek naval contingent caught in a trap where you have Persian forces coming from this direction and a force of Persians coming from this direction. Well, it doesn't work out that way because, of course, this is a notoriously stormy area, and quite a few Persian ships are destroyed in a storm that comes up, and that negates this attempt by the Persians to outflank the Greek navy. So now it is a numbers game here. If Mother Nature can do some harm against the Persian fleet, that's a lot less ships that the Greeks will ultimately have to battle with. And so that was fortuitous. And of course, as I mentioned, there are a couple of relatively minor naval engagements that the Greeks come out doing very well against the Persians during these engagements. Now, when the pass at Thermopylae does fall, the Greek Navy decides that it will retreat. And for the Athenians, that meant, of course, sailing down the coast of the Attic Peninsula and arriving at the main port at the time of Phalerum. Now, on a side note that is going to be of importance to us a little later on, when the Greek fleet decides to pull out and begin its retreat back towards Athens, they have to conduct a ruse because the Persian fleet is right up here, and if a fleet is in retreat, it is very vulnerable. So what the Greeks decided to do was set up a whole bunch of bonfires to make it look like they're camping out, and then quietly slip away. Now, the problem for the Greeks, though, was that a local on the island of Euboea, in one of the local communities, watched what was happening and decided that he was going to inform the Persians that the Greek fleet is in retreat, and now is a pretty good time to wipe them out. And again, this is a trend that we have seen time and time again, where Greeks decide to turn traitor and inform the Persians of various key pieces of information. We see this with the tyrant Hippias back at the Battle of Marathon, King Demaratus, who was an advisor to Xerxes. We see this with the various Greek city-states and territories who have Medized, who have allowed the Persians to march through their territory and have even supplied the Persians. And finally, we have Ephialtes, the local shepherd, who showed the Persians this path, this goat path, by which they could outflank the Spartan position at Thermopylae. So this latest round of Greek treachery could have really ended things dramatically for the Greeks. But the Persians who get the message don't believe him. They don't believe that this Greek is telling the truth. So they kind of, sit on their hands while the Greek fleet does safely get away. And then, of course, when dawn begins to break and they can see that there aren't any ships that are beached along the area where they had been, then the Persians know that, we missed an opportunity here. Hopefully we won't miss another opportunity if one arises. This is going to be important, this little story I've told you that Herodotus has recounted for us a little later on in the lecture when we do get to the final Battle of Salamis. And it is now an open question as to what will happen next, because as I mentioned at the start of this lecture, there are many of the members of the Hellenic League, the members of those 31 poleis who had joined together, but many of them wanted to, again, retreat to the Peloponnese and seal it off at the isthmus. Now, of course, this does not sit well with the Athenians, and Themistocles has his work cut out for him. He has two tasks. He has first to convince the Athenian people themselves that they're still in the fight and that they need to use what military assets they have left, and this is primarily the fleet, which is still intact. Still, we can imagine a top strength of about 200 triremes, which is no joke. So the Athenians are still in the game, and then Themistocles has got to convince the members of the Hellenic League that it is in their best interest to fight alongside the Athenian fleet. Themistocles has ruled out the possibility of another major land battle. Instead, he feels that the Greeks will have a better chance of defeating the Persian navy, and with the Persian navy, defeated, maybe destroyed, the Persian army, as vast as it is, becomes vulnerable without naval support. So Themistocles has got his work cut out for him, convincing people to see his way of thinking. Now, Themistocles' first goal of convincing the Athenian people to stay in the fight, to fight the Persians at sea, this goal of convincing the Athenians is made easier in a way when a delegation returns from Delphi, a delegation of Athenian citizens that had been dispatched to Delphi to ask the oracle, Apollo's priestess, what the Athenians should do now that the pass at Thermopylae had been forced, and now that the Persians had a clear road into the Attic Peninsula, into Athens itself. What should the next course of action be for the Athenians? This they asked of Apollo, and of course, as we've seen earlier, the priestess responds with gibberish. Here she is on her tripod, inhaling the gases that were emitted from the earth at Delphi, and she would respond with gibberish, and there were priests on hand standing by to interpret what they thought she was saying, which of course would be the will of Apollo. And in this case, the oracle, I've quoted some of it here, it's a mixed bag, but if you know what to look for, you can really shape this message to serve your own agenda, particularly if you're Themistocles. And so the delegation returns to Athens with this message from the oracle. Await not in quiet the armed host upon the land. Slip away, turn your back. You will meet in battle anyway. A wall of wood alone shall be a boon to you and your children. Divine Salamis will destroy the sons of women. So a rather cryptic pronouncement, and of course these pronouncements were usually very cryptic, but for Themistocles, who is looking for any angle he can get, he immediately seizes on two phrases in the oracle. The idea of the wooden walls, and some of the old-timers of Athens thought that the wooden walls meant this old palisade fence that used to stand on the Acropolis. And they thought that the people of Athens should hunker down there, or at least some of the people of Athens should hunker down there, and that wooden wall would stand against the Persian assault. But Themistocles says, you are foolish if you think this. The wall of wood is our navy. It is our ships, our triremes, and this is our bastion. This is what will allow us to prevail against the Persians. By taking to the sea in these ships and fighting the Persians at sea, we will emerge victorious. And look, the oracle has even given us the location of the next battle, and of course that is Salamis, which is an island just off the coast of Attica. So as far as Themistocles is concerned, the idea of the means of fighting the battle, the ships, is evident in this oracle, as is the location of the next battle, that of the island of Salamis. And so again, with some pretty crafty politicking, Themistocles is able to convince the Athenian people that this should be their next course of action, to prepare for a naval battle somewhere around the island of Salamis. But of course, Athens could not be defended, and this is, it's a tough call, but it turns out to be the right one. And Themistocles will order the evacuation of Athens. All of the able-bodied men will go to Salamis and will prepare to take up their positions on the rowing benches of the triremes. The civilians will go to Salamis too. They, of course, will not take part in the battle, but they will be there for their own safety. Another city-state, Troezen, also agrees to take in a large number of Athenians as refugees. And this evacuation gets underway and is completed just as the Persians enter Athenian territory. And by the time the Persians do get to Athens itself, there are only a few diehards who could not agree with Themistocles' interpretation, who believed that the wooden fence, the palisade on the Acropolis, was what the god Apollo was referring to, and so they stay there, and they hold out for a while, but ultimately they will all be killed as the Persians take control of Athens and begin systematically burning it to the ground. Themistocles, his next effort has to be to convince the members of the Hellenic League to fight north of the Peloponnese, to fight at Salamis alongside the Athenians. The Athenians have already made up their mind that they will fight. And here's the island of Salamis. This is Attica right here. Here's Athens over here, just to give you some idea of the lay of the land. And Themistocles has to convince the members of the Hellenic League that this is the wise course of action. And of course, he does this by, reminding them of the tactical situation. At Salamis, if you can somehow lure the Persians into the narrow strait here, between the island itself and the Attic Peninsula, in a way this will be reminiscent of Thermopylae, the narrow pass there, where superior numbers won't be a decisive advantage. Certainly the Persians still had probably several hundred more ships than the combined Greek navy, so they have a numeric advantage, but the point is to fight in a place where that numeric advantage won't come into play. And Salamis, the Strait of Salamis, was such a place. So Themistocles attempts to appeal to their logic, and it's a tough sell because many of these guys want to protect their own homeland, which is on the Peloponnese. But finally, Themistocles threatens the Hellenic League by saying, you know what, if you guys don't step up and help us out, we are going to take our 200 triremes, we're going to load them up with our people, and we're going to sail to Italy and start a new city there. And you guys are on your own without our 200 triremes. Good luck. And this is enough to convince the commander of the overall Hellenic League fleet. He was a Spartan named Eurybiades. He says, you know what, you're right. And he basically, with the Spartans on board, everybody else falls in line, and the decision is made to fight alongside the Athenians at Salamis. Now, the trick will be to lure the Persians into the narrow strait. At Thermopylae, they had no choice. That was the only route into southern Greece, was to go through the pass at Thermopylae. So they had to go through that confined space. However, nothing necessitates the Persian navy from going into the Strait of Salamis. It will have to take a clever ruse. And here, Themistocles plays on the stereotype that by now the Persians have, of all Greeks, that they're all treacherous, that they're willing to turn on one another and Medize. And what Themistocles does is have one of his trusted servants, a guy named Sikanos, one night get on a rowboat and row himself across to the Attic Peninsula, where the Persians now control, and report to the area commander there that his master, Themistocles, claims that the Greeks are getting ready to flee, and this will be a prime opportunity for the Persians to bag them all at once while they are trapped within the Strait of Salamis. And if the Persians can block up both ends, the southern end here and the northern end here, then they will have the Greek navy, all of it, in a trap, and basically the campaign will be over, and Xerxes will be master of all of Greece. And again, this is the bait, and the Persians take it. By now, they realize that they had made a mistake earlier at Artemisium, right off the coast of Thermopylae, when that one Greek had told them that the Greek fleet was escaping during the night, and the Persians chose not to believe him, and sure enough, the Greek fleet managed to safely get away. Well, the Persians don't want to see that happening again, and again, they're willing to accept the premise that Greeks are traitors by nature, so this guy is probably telling the truth. So Xerxes decides that his fleet will indeed engage the Greeks, and he decides to split his forces. And traditionally, this is one of the cardinal errors of military history. When you are in an enemy territory and you decide to split your forces. But Xerxes wants to make sure both ends of the Salamis Strait, again the southern end here and what we can call the northern end here, both ends are blocked up. And so Xerxes orders a large number of his ships to basically row across down the south of the island and come up to block this area here. These were the Egyptian contingent, and this is very, very good for the Greeks, because again they will actually be fighting lesser Persians now when the battle begins as the sun rises, because these Egyptians have been told, just take up a blocking position here, don't go into the straits themselves, wait until you catch any straggling Greeks that may be trying to escape from this end. So the contours of the battle take shape, a very confined space, with the Greeks, who the Persians think are all disorientated and fearful, and are one step away from surrendering anyway. But that is hardly what they will meet as the sun rises. Now, on the morning of the battle, Xerxes actually had a throne set up overlooking the Strait of Salamis, so that he could be kind of up in the luxury box as the spectacle unfolds. And he had made it known that he will be there, he will be watching, and this turns out to be an added complication for the Persian fleet, because if the great king is watching, you better believe that if you are seen as a shirker or somebody is holding back, you will feel the wrath of the great king. I mean, if you guys remember the story of Pythios, that Lydian nobleman who tried to get his eldest son out of the campaign, and enraged Xerxes had the boy cut in half. So the Persian fleet and every sailor in it knew that they had to do their duty, otherwise there was going to be some big problems. So as the sun rises, we see the Persians have entered the Strait of Salamis, and here is a illustrated map. This is an overhead shot to give you guys some sense of just how confined this space is. I have this black arrow here on the illustrated map that refers to this type of peninsula that juts out. And you can see in the overhead shot, this is taken from a jet airliner, you can see the freighters, the modern freighters that are at anchor here and up here. But to fight in such a confined space, because if we're looking at the illustrated map, this area here equates to this area here. This really is some tight quarters. But this is, of course, just as Themistocles has designed. And there are a few added factors that we should mention. So on the morning of the battle, there are a couple of factors that are going to count against Xerxes' navy and its chance of success. The first is, of course, the confined space of the Strait of Salamis. You can see Xerxes' navy entering the strait, and much of that navy was comprised of Phoenician ships, and these were lightly built triremes. They were built for speed. Now, on the morning of the battle, a breeze blew in that the Greeks were familiar with, but of course the Phoenicians were not. And this caused the Phoenician ships, the lightly built Phoenician ships, to turn sideways. And of course, when this happened, it made them very vulnerable, made their flanks very vulnerable to the more powerful and heavily built Athenian triremes that had a field day that morning. Indeed, as the battle began sometime around 8 a.m., it would go on for roughly between 10 to 12 hours. Certainly, while there was still enough light for the Greeks to continue to administer the pummeling that they gave the Persian fleet. What complicated things again for the Persians was the very presence of Xerxes. He's set up on a throne somewhere here where he's watching the action, and all the Greeks, all the Persian sailors, the members of the Phoenician contingent, the Egyptian contingent, there was a contingent of Ionian Greeks that were pressed into service as part of the Persian fleet. All these guys knew that the great king was watching. So as the initial contingents of the Persian fleet go into the straits and get pummeled, they want to withdraw, but they cannot because all the other contingents don't want to be accused of cowardice, so they keep rowing into the melee. And this creates this enormous traffic jam where the Persian fleet is basically stuck in place while the Greek ships begin shearing off oars or puncturing hulls and sinking ships. So the presence of Xerxes really did backfire in this case because people were trying too hard to impress him, when the more prudent course of action would be to allow some flexibility in these broader waters out here. Everybody wanted to get in on the action inside the strait itself, so it worked to the Greek advantage. Now, as far as numbers go, they're sketchy, but the sources that I've seen that make the most sense to me are the Greeks lose about 40 ships. The Persian contingents, the Persian fleet, will lose just in excess of 200 ships. So it's quite a significant victory for the Greeks, and the Persian fleet is shattered. Indeed, many of these contingents, after the battle is over, when night falls, many of the Phoenicians in particular are going to slink away back to their home waters. And this is a real problem now for Xerxes, as his fleet has been crippled. He is concerned that the Greeks will go on the offensive and sail up to the Hellespont, that area that he had bridged, set up a pontoon bridge of boats. And if the Greeks seize that, then he, Xerxes, and his army will be trapped in Greece as winter approaches. So it's a very big dilemma for Xerxes, and he decides to split the difference. He and most of the army will head home, accompanied by what's left of the fleet, but he will leave behind a pretty significant size force to take up winter quarters in Boeotia, a region of Greece that had Medized. And I will talk about that final engagement in the next video lecture.